Pain, it's complicated. Many people, including healthcare practitioners, subscribe to a biomechanical model of pain. The body experiences pain, you fix the underlying problem, and the pain resolves, much like making repairs on your car. However, unlike a piece of machinery, the way we experience pain is not simply a response to biological insults, but a complex interaction of biological, psychological, and social factors known as the biopsychosocial model. While pain is often attributable in part to structural damage, that's not always the case, and even when it is the case, the magnitude of the perceived problem doesn't always correlate one-to-one with the degree of underlying damage. That is why two people experiencing the same injury can vary so dramatically in their pain perception and degree of disability. The experience of pain is closely shaped by expectations, history of previous injury, fitness level, lifestyle, psychological stressors, sleep quality, nutrition, and underlying illnesses. I dropped a loaded 225-pound barbell directly on my toe a few days ago. It's feeling better, but I had a pronounced limp the first couple of days. I had all the classic signs of soft tissue injury: bruising, redness, swelling, and of course, pain. I kept my leg elevated the first couple of days in order to reduce the swelling, simply because it was painful, but otherwise made no attempts to reduce the swelling and inflammation by using ice or wrapping it in a compressive bandage. While it probably would have been a good idea, I didn't even bother immobilizing it by buddy taping it to an adjacent toe or even placing my foot in an open toe splint. Not because it wouldn't have helped, but simply because I didn't want to be inconvenienced. Plus, my body already had built-in mechanisms to protect damaged structures, namely swelling and limping. I'm not recommending going about it in the same way that I'm describing, but I do think it's helpful to understand the logic. Based on our current model of pain, what I'm saying sounds rather questionable, but is in line with current evidence, clinical reasoning, and personal experience. I understood that the inflammatory process going on in my foot was my body attempting to heal the injury, and as long as the pain was tolerable, I just let it be. The body was already using its own methods of protecting the damaged area and repairing the injury. Attempts at immobilizing it using splints and dressings may have protected it a little, but it wasn't worth the trade-off in terms of mobility limitations and loss of training time. Also, while rest, ice, compression, and elevation may have provided symptomatic relief, other than resting the affected area, the other stuff generally isn't going to help it heal any faster. That goes for a lot of conventional approaches. They are just there to make the situation manageable while your body heals itself. Taking some ibuprofen and putting ice on it doesn't accelerate what your body will do just fine on its own. The one thing I did do was avoid things that directly aggravated the pain, mainly walking. Other than that, as long as I didn't have to bend my toe, I could even do things like squatting and deadlifting without too much of a problem. When asked if I broke my toe, my answer raised eyebrows. It doesn't matter because it doesn't change the management. Getting it x-rayed wouldn't add a thing to the actual approach. Fractures like this are usually of the non-displaced hairline variety and heal on their own as long as you don't do anything to aggravate it, like trying to jump or run. Now, most people don't know that, so it makes sense that they seek out an expert to rule out anything more concerning. The problem with this is that healthcare practitioners will often give overly conservative blanket activity restrictions that do not take individual variability and specific situations into account. They do this to protect their own interest because they don't have time to understand the specifics or because they don't know any better. This keeps people with injuries inactive longer than necessary, which is often damaging to their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. There's a lot more that can be said on this topic, the scope of which I really can't cover in one social media post. Also, I am not in a position to tell you what you should do and shouldn't do regarding an injury. If you think you need to get a medical evaluation, by all means, do so. If you don't know whether or not to be concerned about an injury, you need to seek the advice of someone who does. However, I am offering you the reassurance that many physical injuries are self-resolving, as the body is a self-healing apparatus that can often be trusted to fix itself. And the way in which you experience pain changes dramatically once you're able to distinguish between what is truly a cause for alarm and the other 99% of cases where trusting your body's capacity to adapt and heal is the best approach.